Hello, and welcome to tonight's episode of The Bottom Line on Air. My name is Claire Sullivan, and I will be your host. Each week, we will explore our campus's current events and breaking news stories. We're using this space to dig deeper and to elevate our discourse and understanding and to put names to faces on FSU campus. First, we will talk to Jessica Thayer, the Vice President of the Student Government Association, about renewed efforts to collaborate between SGA and other student organizations on campus. Later, we're going to chat with Dean of Students, Crowe, about what the Office for Student Affairs is doing to support students during the pandemic, and particularly how mental health services can be accessed on campus and virtually. Finally, we are going to talk to Will Coburn, an environmental activist, about an upcoming global climate strike that will take place on Friday, March 19th. The theme, No More Broken Promises, is one he's passionate about, and we look forward to hearing more. Our first guest is Vice President of the Student Government Association, Jessica Thayer. One of Jessica's missions as a leader of SGA has been to rehab the Big Five organization, which was once composed of the largest groups on campus. Dissatisfied with the lack of inclusion and diversity within the group, Thayer decided to expand the organization to include more student groups than ever. And we are so glad to get a peek into the new Big Five. Thank you, Jessica, so much for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. So many students may not remember the Big Five. Can you tell us about what groups were involved and what the group formally wanted to achieve?
Absolutely. So the Big Five was something that actually predated my experience in SGA. So it took me some effort to even understand it myself. But I had a wonderful discussion with Mr. Robert Cooper, who sort of laid it all out for me. The Big Five used to be a group composed of the largest five organizations on campus, which at the time was PSA, UPC, Berg Bash, SGA, and RHA. However, over time, those groups sort of just fell out of touch with the whole Big Five organization. The meetings were not frequent. They were typically only called upon by the president of the university when a specific issue needed to be addressed. So it wasn't very collaborative, and it just didn't really seem to serve its main purpose since that means of communication wasn't really active.
So the new group is composed of how many different student organizations?
Yeah, so the new group has sort of taken this new turn. I actually extended it to all presidents of every single on-campus student organization. So roughly that's over 100 students. And I know that, in doing that, not every student leader wants to participate, but I thought it was super important to just at least open up that invitation because, I think the Big Five could really be a platform that Frostburg doesn't have right now. There's obviously more than five leaders on our campus who deserve to have their voices heard. So bringing a platform to them that would allow them to connect with other student leaders and talk about issues that are facing each one of their own individual constituents, I thought was going to be super important.
That's a huge difference now. So with much larger representation, how have the goals of the group changed, if they have changed? And what are some of the projects that you, as a collection of student leaders, have been able to take on?
Yeah, so I think honestly, my main focus with it now is really just to open up that avenue of communication. And one of the largest components of the Big Five is what I call a president's report. So after each monthly meeting, I form all of the notes into a president's report, which gets sent to the entire executive cabinet, including Mr. Bill Mandicott and Mr. Cooper, just to sort of see the action items that they can take in their own individual departments. And I think it's super helpful because you're giving sort of the administration this snapshot of what the current campus climate is from leaders across the board. I think we've all, seen how student leaders, specific student leaders, get called upon time and time again to do offer their voice, but you really need to expand that in order to be able to understand what the whole campus is experiencing. So just a few items that we worked on last semester. We talked about academic resources, CAPS concerns. We talked about some organizing on campus and freedom freedom of speech concerns. We actually had some really great results come out of that, including the improvement of the caps here on campus. I know that they added a few more employees, and overall student consensus with caps seems to be up, which is awesome. Um, we also have some more PAL mentors for like those interdivisional courses, as you know, first year students and second year students come into classes or looking for, you know, a little help. Those are increasing as well. And we also had a walkthrough org fair, which I thought was so cool. A lot of the student leaders, you know, expressed just how hard it was to bring students into their organization in COVID times. You know, you can't have in-person meetings, and that really sort of takes away from SGA's hub of student leaders. But Coop was really awesome in helping us get that going too.
That's great. Do you think that this increased collaboration is going to carry on into the future? Do you think that the new Big Five would be something that you hand off to future SGA administrations?
I absolutely hope so. I think it's been awesome. Literally, just the conversations that we have with, you know, a handful of students that join are always so eye-opening because, you know, we all have different constituents that we serve. And even though like we're all Bobcats, you know, under this huge umbrella, there's so many divisions under that that, you know, can really only be understood when you're talking with people who are of that group or who know that group or who work with that group every single day. So I'm hoping that it's something that we can continue to build upon. We have some really awesome action items coming out of that. And I think it could be a really great bridge to the administration as well, because, you know, as SGA is just one group that tries to, you know, build that bridge. I think having that collective student voice is so important because you're not just getting a few select student voices, you're getting people from across the board. And I think being able to hand that to them in one sheet of paper saying, here's what student leaders are calling upon you to do, take action, you know, like we're watching, I think is really, really cool. So I would love to see it proceed, hopefully grow. But yeah.
It's really exciting to see this diversity among student organizations in the SGA. Quickly, before we finish up, the candidates for the 2021 to 2022 SGA election were announced last week, and voting begins on March 24th. How are you feeling as you cross the finish line on such an unusual year? What did you learn in your role as vice president?
I'm thrilled to have a two-ticket race for president and vice president of SGA. This has been something that SGA has really needed to see. And I think that, you know, you asked me what is one of the things that I've learned as vice president. I feel like I could go on for days and days and days, but really, I think a huge lesson for me has just been, you know, not being afraid to not know the answer, looking at the systems that we have in place and really critically examining whether they're efficient or effective and how we can build upon that. You know, SGA has a lot of improvement to do in terms of transparency with the student body and communication with the student body. And I think that we've made a lot of leaps and bounds this year with that, but it's nowhere close to being finished. And I think that, you know, we have a continuous mission to do better for our students. So I'm excited to see those two tickets. And I know that whatever the outcome is, there's an awesome Senate that's waiting to make some really big changes next year. But again, just increased communication, increased transparency has been huge. And I've been really, really honored to be able to serve in a Senate that's maybe started to take that shift and change it a little bit. So
That's great. It definitely seems like this is going to be an exciting election year or semester for SGA. And Jessica, it has been a pleasure to have you on the Bottom Line on Air. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and for being so passionate about student collaboration. We look forward to seeing the effort continue under this next administration. Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you all.
Our next guest is Dean of Students, Crowe. Dean Crowe is a familiar face on campus and an alumni of the university, but many students are unaware of just how many services his office has to offer, including the many new programs offered by the Counseling and Psychological Services Office. Dean Crowe, it is a pleasure to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Claire. It's a pleasure to meet you.
You too. So for anyone out there who doesn't know much about the Office of Student Affairs and what the Dean of Students does, can you give us a quick overview?
Sure. I think probably most people assume that the Dean of Students' primary responsibility is student discipline, and certainly that's a large part of my job. I'm the Chief Conduct Officer for the university, and ultimately I'm the person in charge of enforcing the Student Code of Conduct. In my day-to-day job with that, I tend to deal with maybe some of the larger, more, maybe the more controversial conduct issues that may happen on campus, but I also train the residence life staff to enforce conduct policies in the residence hall so that we're doing it in a way that's consistent according to our policies and fundamentally fair. Beyond that, I also work with students who are in distress. I chair a committee called Students of Concern, where we pull together a team of professionals on campus, to work with students who maybe just aren't doing well at the institution. Maybe they're not getting homework in, maybe they need services, maybe they need some resources, and they just don't know how to connect to those services. So our job within this committee is to connect those students to those services, because in the end, we want students to be successful. We want them to feel like they're connected here and that they're ready to go. Oftentimes, I'll get a phone call from maybe a student, sometimes a parent, or even a faculty member who's concerned about a student, and I'll be that, at least that initial conversation with the student, to kind of see what's going on, what's happening, and what can we do to get them plugged into resources that help them become successful. So in many respects, the Dean of Students is a bit of a case manager, right? Students have some needs, and Student Affairs really does that in a way kind of writ large. Student Affairs needs to be a place where students can go if they don't know where else to go, right? They might have an academic issue, they might need academic help, but they don't know who to talk to. Come to Student Affairs, let us help you with that, and we can get you connected with the resources that you need. I maintain relationships with off-campus property managers. So, when students are contacting me because they're having problems with a landlord, I may help them call the landlord, and find out what their resources are with working within the community, particularly like if they're with a landlord who's not being as attentive as a landlord should be around heating, cooling, right, and all of those safety issues. I do supervise. I have what's called administrative supervision over the counseling office. The clinical supervision is actually done by Dr. Mandel, Susan Mandel, in the day-to-day. And probably over the past year and a half, CAPS is really what's been taking a lot of my time, because CAPS was a real issue, right? Students couldn't get in to see a clinician when they needed to. I think we have gotten that straightened out now, so students are able to go over and see CAPS. I know when I first got a hold of CAPS, students were being told that they couldn't be seen, and in some cases for non-emergency issues, they were waiting 2 weeks before they could see somebody. Right now, with our latest stats, students are seen within 4 days for non-emergency needs. But there is no wait list. So, we're continuing to kind of focus our efforts over there. I also now have supervisory responsibilities over the Office of Residence Life. And so my next, project will be to begin to work with Residence Life, do a better assessment of how we're doing over there relative to day-to-day services for students, and what can we do to continue to move that program forward so it's better meeting student needs.
That's great. As someone who transferred to FSU kind of like halfway through my college career, it's reassuring to know that there are services like Student Affairs, because I know what it's like to kind of feel like disconnected from campus. So that all sounds really fantastic and helpful for students. And of course, like all offices on campus, the coronavirus pandemic has presented new challenges to those in your office. How has the Division for Student Affairs overcome the obstacles over the last year?
Well, I don't know of anybody who goes into the work of student affairs because they don't love students, right? You don't love the connection that you have with students. And I think having some of those barriers with students right now has really been the most difficult part. Usually if a student has needs, we want them to come into the office so that we can talk to them, kind of engage with them. We want students to kind of be in this space so that we can develop relationships. And this year that just hasn't happened. because of COVID. So, we've had to move a lot of our operations digitally. I can tell you, like, now all of my conduct meetings that I do, everything's fully online. Counseling, for example, we're moving everything through the telehealth model. So, kind of trying to rethink our programs and services to fit that virtual world has probably been the biggest challenge that we've been dealing with so far. On the same token, though, we've really had to rethink what we're doing with activities and how we engage students on campus. We have to social distance, we have to be safe, but you know what? Students really need to find ways to build community while they're here. They need to be able to engage with peers. They need to feel like Frostburg State University belongs to me. And thankfully, you know what, we've got a great activities office over in the Lane Center. And so we've been trying to do whatever we can do to kind of support Coop in his efforts to really kind of find those creative and fun ways in which we can bring students together. Dr. Graham is in my office, and he is really kind of dealing almost exclusively with COVID and COVID testing. That's really become his world. He's continuing to focus on that. Right now, though, we're starting to kind of switch gears and think about the upcoming academic year and recruiting the next student class. How do we welcome them? How do we, introduce them to the institution? And how do we help them understand that there's really a whole safety net of different programs and resources here for students, and this is how you access them.
Switching gears for a minute, as Dean of Students, what are some of the things that you want to share with students about how you can be a resource for them, and how they can get in touch before they find themselves in your office for a disciplinary issue?
Sure. Well, it's funny. Every year without fail, I'm usually doing at least one hearing with a student who comes in and is in tears. We end up having a conversation. We work through whatever the conduct issue is, and then they leave the office. And they always tell me, you're not as mean as what I thought you'd be. And I'm not a mean person. I have to do conduct, of course, but I'm always going to do that in a way that's respectful and supportive of a student. But again, it's more than just conduct in the Dean of Students office. We're here to kind of amplify a student voice and to support students. So if there's anything going on in the world of a student where you need some support and you don't know where to go, come here so that we can help you. If sometimes, we have to become an advocate for a student, particularly in areas where maybe they need to engage with other offices, they don't know how to do it, they might have to engage with another staff or a faculty member, we can become an advocate for that student. But come in and talk to us. I've even worked with students who are off campus and they were like, you know what, I'm about to have a big party this weekend and I don't want to get in trouble. What can I do so that I'm not in trouble? We have those conversations too all the time. Here's some things that you need to think about. Here's what the local law will tell you about noise ordinances. And these are what your rights and responsibilities are if a police officer comes to your door. So certainly engage us, use us. I also tell students, when in doubt, come. I deal with students all the time who don't think that my problem is that big or it's that bad. But if it's in your mind right now and you don't know where to go, guess what? It's that big, because for you, it's that big. And I'd rather a student always err on the side of coming to student affairs and asking to see me versus not. I'll be more than happy to help you in any way that I can.
That's fantastic. It sounds like the way that you're running things is definitely based on a relationship of trust with the students, and I really respect and admire that.
Well, with the student, in my job, I have the unenviable task sometimes of telling students no. And you know what, if it has to be a no, I will stick to the no. But I always want to make sure that a student leaves my office feeling like they were heard and that they were respected. We may not disagree on the outcome, but did you feel like you were heard and that were you respected? And if that didn't happen, then I feel like I'm not doing my job right. So, but that's all contingent on a relationship and getting to know the student.
Right. And just one last question. As we begin to think about a post-pandemic college campus, what are some of the things that you've learned over the last year that you think you are going to carry into the future?
Well, that's a really good question. And there's a few things that immediately come to mind. The pandemic world, at least with counseling, has really opened up a new door for us. I think this telehealth model of counseling, even in the post-pandemic world, is something that we're going to continue. I think if a student wants to come in and see a therapist, we're going to make that happen for them. But for some students, there's a certain stigma about leaving my room and walking to the counseling office and seeing somebody, and providing this telehealth model basically removes that stigma. And we want to make sure that we continue to do that. It's also really reinforced for me that we really need to focus on community, particularly over this past year between the pandemic and the racial justice issues that have been going on all over the United States and right here upon our campus. That really tells me that we as an institution really have to work hard on cultivating what that community looks like here at this institution, right? And what is our space needs to be both representative and welcoming of every student who comes here on campus. And that we need to, and that sense of community and reinforcing that community really needs to be job one. We lost that this past year, right, in the age of the pandemic. But given everything that's going on, I've always known that it was important, but now I think that importance has been, amplified. And we need to be focusing on that on the upcoming year. But that's helping students understand, as a student, you have a lot of rights and you need to know what your rights are, and you need to not be afraid to exercise your rights. Mm-hmm. On the same token, though, as a student, you should also know what your responsibilities are and what your responsibility as a member of the community, this community of scholars, both to yourself and to the people that you're with. And how do we move our community in that direction?
Well, Dean Crowe, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. The Division for Student Affairs can be found on the FSU website with many links to the resources mentioned during this segment. Take some time to become acquainted with those services, to take care of yourself. And again, thank you very much, Dean Crowe.
I really appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Our final guest is Will Coburn, a native of Frostburg who has been a longtime environmental activist. Alongside a small group of organizers, Will is planning a climate strike for Friday, March 19th at noon on the FSU campus. The event, part of a global call to strike, is reminiscent of a similar event held at FSU in September of 2019. We are so glad to have Will here to give us the details for the event. Thank you so much, Will.
Thanks for having me.
So Will, tell us a little bit about your upcoming event.
On Friday has been dubbed No More Broken Promises, and it's an event that involves students and community members who advocate for national and international change whenever it comes to climate change.
So students will gather together near the Bobcat statue and then walk towards the Arboretum, right?
Yes, the event starts at on noon on Friday.
Should students bring anything with them?
Yes, students should bring gloves if they have them, and a positive attitude.
Awesome. What are the gloves for?
We're going to be doing a litter cleanup in the Arboretum.
So who's included in the speaking portion of the program?
Laurel Plitnick, Ariana Ward, Max Hancock, and Iz Reyes, along with myself.
So the theme of the protest, No More Broken Promises, seems aimed at both national and international governments who have not made good on their promises to address climate change. What do you think about that theme, and what are some of the broken promises that you think need to be addressed?
Yeah, I think the theme is very accurate. As a nation and as a globe, we've been fed lies, that if we recycle and turn off lights, everything's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, things aren't okay. Right. And it's going to take more action from industries and politicians to solve the climate catastrophe. And it all starts with how we buy and consume, along with who we vote for.
So you've been a longtime environmental activist. How did you get your start in that field? What made you invested in this?
Well, I've always been passionate about protecting the environment. And I guess it all started back in 2015 with the local frack-free Frostburg ban on fracking, both in the state of Maryland and in the Frostburg community.
What would you say is, you may have already answered this with that response, but what would you say is the environmental issue that matters to you the most?
I think one environmental issue that matters to me the most is um, getting clean, renewable solar energy to low-income community members within the Appalachian region of the country. I think that's really important.
So last question, what are some of the ways that you think FSU could improve in terms of environmental impact?
Yeah, I think some ways that FSU could improve would be, adding solar panels
Mhm.
to their campus, um, encouraging the Allegheny County Transit um, to purchase cleaner buses that drive the students around the campus, um, really to educate people more about sustainability and build on the sustainability program that we have on campus.
Mhm. And do you think, like, just based on what you know about these solutions, like the change in buses and the solar panels, is that something that's like attainable for FSU?
Yeah, I think it's pretty attainable for FSU and the community. Yeah.
Mm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Will, for taking the time to be with us today. To join the climate action strike happening this Friday, March 19th at noon, meet us at the Bobcat statue. We look forward to seeing continued activism around the issue of climate change. And we are so grateful, Will and to the other organizers for their leadership on this issue. Have a great evening, Will, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
We want to thank our guests, SGA Vice President Jessica Thayer, Dean of Students Crowe, and activist Will Coburn for joining us on tonight's episode of The Bottom Line on Air. There's so much happening on our campus, and we are glad to have some shared insight and information with you. Next week's episode will feature the candidates for President and Vice President of SGA, Ariana Ward, Ismarai Reyes, Delaney Blubaugh, and Michael Hollingsworth, as well as Paparazzi Perfect, a student group that has persevered through the pandemic and are serving our campus looks despite the odds. This show is a collaboration between FSU TV3 and The Bottom Line. To stay connected with us, you can find The Bottom Line at thebottomlinenews.com and on Facebook and Twitter. FSU TV3 can also be found on social media and at frostburg.edu/FSU TV3. Thank you for joining us. My name is Claire Sullivan, and this has been The Bottom Line on Air. Good night.